simply is not known. As we said, the police gave out some more information today. It's actually angered some people, the way that information was released, the intent perhaps behind it. We'll talk about that, tell you all the latest ahead.
Videos of Gray's arrest has now come forward to explain what he saw that day and why he decided to shoot the video in the first place. Kevin Moore, who recorded this disturbing scene of Gray wailing while being held down by police officers, told the Baltimore Sun that he heard a police taser, then grabbed his cell phone to capture the arrest on film.
I just saw the way they had him folded up. They had him folded up like he was a crab or like a piece of origami, you know what I mean? You wonder why we dislike the police or why we're so aggressive toward the police. This is why.
We should note that police have denied that Gray was tasered, but let's bring in Captain Eric Kowalczyk. He's a spokesman for the Baltimore Police Department. Captain, let's start with the general picture here, what it looks like. There is this disturbing video of Freddie Gray wailing with police on top of him. Then there's also video of him apparently being dragged to the police van. It looks like he is unable, or at least having trouble walking. The next thing we know, Freddie Gray's neck has snapped, and then a few days later, he's dead. 11 days later, the police of Baltimore have provided no explanation, no accountability, nothing. Do you understand why this looks so bad for the Baltimore police?
You know, Jake, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. What I know is that we have a community that's in pain. We have a family that's in pain. We have officers that want answers to the same questions that you're asking. And we have an obligation to find out exactly what happened here. And this investigation is doing just that. We have a talented team of investigators that we've brought together to get into the details of what happened here and get to the truth. We owe that to the family, we owe that to the city, we owe that to everybody that's watching.
Well, why is it taking so long,
is going to take its course.
Why is it taking so long to get to the truth?
Sure. Look, I understand. There's very little that I can say right now that's going to help people that are frustrated. The pace of the investigation is what it is. We have investigators that are doing their very best to get to the information that they need to get. And what you've seen over the last 2.5 years in this police department under this police commissioner is an organization that's trying to bring itself into alignment with the community, is trying to be more transparent and more open, and initiating reforms to be able to do just that. Part of those reforms are putting out as much information as we can about these investigations. Over the last week, we have put out more information about this investigation than we typically do in a way to be as transparent and accountable to the people as possible.
Captain, you put out information, but it's not relevant to the big question, how did he get injured? He was in police custody and something happened to him either before or after or both. He got into the van. What happened?
And that's exactly what the investigation is, that we hope the investigation is going to find out.
But when are we going to see the results of the investigation?
And I know that people want to get those. I want to get those. We obviously are doing everything that we can to move with a sense of urgency, and we have promised that we will turn over the results of the investigation wherever we are in it on May 1st to the state's attorney's office for their review. And that's what our focus is moving with a sense of urgency to make sure that we get the answers that we need to get for the family, for the city, for the people that are watching. And we're going to turn those over to the state's attorney's office on May 1st.
Sir, was there a video camera in the van? Was there a video camera in the van?
There was not. We've said that before. And look, I understand. We know that the community is frustrated. We hear it. There was a peaceful demonstration a few minutes before I came on. There have been protests last night, and we absolutely hear and understand the frustration. But the most important thing that we can do is get to the truth of what happened, and we owe that to the family, and that's what we're focused on, is getting to the truth.
But I guess what people don't understand is why it's taking so long. It's a pretty simple question. He was in your custody. You have access to the 6 police officers. Something happened to his neck and then he died, and it's now 11 days later. It doesn't take 11 days to figure out what happened. If you gave me the 6 police officers, I could find out within an hour.
You know, when we conduct a criminal investigation like this, we have to be very, very careful that we don't do anything to jeopardize the case. And this is a complicated investigation. The police commissioner said yesterday that the medical examiner in their preliminary exam told us that we may never know what happened here. We are going to do everything that we can to get to the bottom to get to the truth of everything, to find out exactly what happened here. That takes time. This is a complex investigation. We have investigators that have to go through each individual piece of evidence. There's interviews, and then we have to go back and re-interview people. All of these things that I'm telling you, though, don't get to the heart of the issues, though. People are frustrated. They're concerned. They want answers, and it's important that we get out, that we hear that concern, we feel that concern, and that's why we're moving with a sense of urgency to get to that May 1st deadline and turn over as much information as we can.
I think the hearing and the feeling is being conveyed. I think what people want is not so much the hearing and the feeling, but actually just some answers. But I want to ask you a question about the interviews. We've been told by law enforcement representatives that of the 6 law enforcement officials involved in some way in what happened, 5 of them have been interviewed. Why hasn't the 6th one been interviewed?
So we put out publicly yesterday that 5 of the 6 have been interviewed, and that those interviews have been memorialized electronically. Like in any criminal investigation, people have their constitutional rights. Those don't go away during the course of a criminal investigation, even when it's police officers. And I understand that that's concerning to some people, but we have to protect people's constitutional rights, whether they're police officers or they're citizens, and those constitutional rights just don't go away.
I want to ask you about Lieutenant Brian Rice. He's one of the officers who the police force has named were involved. And news has broken indicating that Lieutenant Rice has been accused of domestic violence twice in the past. In one of those instances, he was accused of threatening someone's life. Given these accusations, was any consideration given to removing this officer from the streets at any time?
You know, I can't comment on personnel records. What I can tell you is specific to this investigation, that our investigators are going to look at every piece of evidence that's out there. They're going to look at the timeline of events that led up to our interaction with Mr. Gray. They're going to look at what that interaction was, and then the subsequent events that led to his tragic passing. And that includes everything.
I want to ask you about a statement made by an official of the Fraternal Order of Police yesterday, referring to the protesters as a, quote, lynch mob. Do you fear that a comment like that puts the citizens of Baltimore, including your own officers, at greater risk by further inflaming tensions?
You know, clearly I understand the concern over the choice of words. I don't want to speak for the Fraternal Order of Police. That's a separate organization. They have their own elected officials and spokespeople that can do that for them. Our focus is and continues to be on the investigation, and I'm making sure that we do everything that we can to find out the answers, turn those over to the state's attorney's office so that the people of Baltimore can know exactly what happened.
Well, we look forward to finding out what happened. Captain Eric Kowalczyk, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Coming up, it's a case that...
From the beginning, that no one is above the law in our city. I was sickened and heartbroken by the statement of charges that we heard today. Because no one in our city is above the law. Justice must apply to all of us equally. With today's official indictment, I have ordered Police Commissioner Batts to utilize the full extent of his legal authority and immediately suspend all officers facing felony charges. In fact, warrants have been executed and 5 officers are in custody. We know that the vast majority of the men and the women in the Baltimore City Police Department serve our city with pride, with courage, with honor, and with distinction. But to those of you who wish to engage in brutality, misconduct, racism, and corruption, let me be clear. There is no place in the Baltimore City Police Department for you. Today's indictments are the next step in the legal process that is running its course. And as mayor, I will continue to be relentless in changing the culture of the police department to ensure that everyone in our city is treated equally under the law. There will be justice for Mr. Gray, there will be justice for his family, and there will be justice for the people of Baltimore. Thank you.
I'm joined by CNN legal analyst Sunny Hostin and CNN senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, along with respected forensic pathologist Cyril Weck, to talk more about today's extraordinary events. Jeffrey, let me start with you. The police union just minutes ago called this all a rush to judgment, suggesting charges came unusually quick in a case of this nature. There were also accusations that politics motivated the decision we heard today. Is it unusual, Jeffrey, for a case like this to already have resulted in charges not even 2 weeks after the death?
Yes, it is unusual. It was surprising to me. I certainly was expecting a longer wait, but that doesn't mean the charges don't have validity. I mean, this was a very quick action by the prosecutor, and I think only when we see these charges tested in court will we know whether there was an inappropriate rush to judgment. Certainly, her statement today was a summary of the evidence she has, but we'll only know when it's tested in court.
Sonny, the driver of the transport van, was charged not only with second-degree murder, but manslaughter by vehicle. We assume that the prosecutor is leaning into the idea that Freddie Gray got a so-called rough ride. In Philadelphia, they're called nickel rides. In other cities, they're called joy rides. They're these jerky, violent rides that bang prisoners up. How can that be proved?
You know, I think that you're right. I think when you look at the charges, because she charged not only manslaughter by vehicle, she also charged him with second-degree depraved heart murder, which tells me that she believes that he is one of the worst actors here, because the depraved heart means that he intentionally, willfully, deliberately acted with depraved indifference to human life in his actions. And so I think that she's got to prove, certainly, that there was this rough ride. And the way you prove that is not only through testimony. I suspect she's going to get one or two or perhaps even more of the officers to turn state's evidence and testify against the driver. She can also use a lot of the forensic information garnered from the medical examiner's reports and experts to prove that a rough ride existed.
Cyril, could anything in the autopsy prove that Freddie Gray's injuries were not sustained by the result of his own actions, as some police leaks to the media seem to be suggesting? There seemed to be a suggestion a few days ago in a different media outlet that perhaps he was banging his own head against the van's walls. How could that be proven or disproven?
Well, I've read the statements from the officials. This man had his legs shackled and his hands cuffed, and he was placed in a prone position. Pray tell, how was he running around and banging himself in the van? I've been saying this for 48 hours or more before I even learned about this. This is the most egregious case in modern times that I can think of. From the very beginning, they placed him in a hog-tied position, prone, and brought his hands back behind him. They briefly sat him up, and then they placed him in that position again. When they put him into the van, they placed him again into a full hog-tied position, prone, face down, legs shackled, hands brought. That procedure was banned more than 20 years ago. Where have these officers been? The International Association of Police Chiefs, the Royal Canadian Police Force, every police agency in every metropolitan city has talked about not using the hog-tied position. So now you have him in that position. He's yelling and screaming for help, and his body is inert, and the van is moving. There's the velocity. You asked a moment ago, how will this be proven? Those injuries are not what we call spontaneous pathological fractures. He did not have metastatic carcinoma that had brittled his bones, and he didn't have osteoporosis. These injuries came as that body flopped back and forth, breaking the vertebrae in the neck, and then eventually severing the spinal cord. This is an open and shut case. You'll have no problem, I guarantee you, the prosecution, in finding police expert procedure people around and forensic pathologists to put this together. There is no alternative explanation for how these injuries were sustained and when they were incurred.
Wow. Jay,
Jeff, go ahead.
Can I just say that Cyril, I think, is getting a little ahead of the game here, calling this an open and shut case. These officers may well be convicted, and we will see this in court. But we have not heard their side of the story. We have not heard the explanation for what sort of injuries he may have suffered outside the police van before he got in. So I just think it's worth pausing, recognize how serious these charges are, but to say that this is an open and shut case at this point, I'm certainly not willing to go there, though I defer to the great Cyril Wecht on many things.
Well, no, one comment, if I may make, sir,
Cyril Wecht.
about thank you. When the injuries occurred, but the injuries had not occurred when Mr. Gray was running away. So if the injuries were sustained, they were sustained again by the police in their stopping him. And then you get back to the whole business of why was he stopped and why was it necessary to place him in a prone position. And if they did produce injuries, and they well may have, it would have been because they were compressing and they were leaning into his back, producing quite possibly the initial fractures of a linear, non-displaced nature, which were then significantly aggravated by that inert body flopping around in the van.
All right, gentlemen, we'll continue this conversation in my chambers.